The church went completely silent. 80 people, not one breath. Willa Fern Ashcroft stood 3 rows from the front in her white dress, wildflowers in her fist. The music had stopped. The preacher had stopped. Everything had stopped. Declan Rourke looked at her, top to bottom. And then he said it. Quiet enough to be cruel, loud enough for every single person in that room to hear. I thought you understood what you were. 80 people watched, waiting to see if she would cry. Beg, fall apart. She did not fall apart. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned around. Same pace she came in, back straight, chin up, and walked out the door. She had nothing, no plan, no money, no home, just a ruined dress, a dead father's name. And somewhere in a cabin she hadn't visited in years, a secret that was going to change everything. The dress was white once. Now it was the color of Copper Ridge in September. Dust red, sun-beaten, the kind of color that doesn't wash out. Willa Fern Ashcroft stood in the middle of the open plain, alone, the wind pulling at her veil like it wanted to take something from her too, her hands at her sides, her chin up. Not crying, which was strange, because everything inside her was screaming. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to the morning, back to before the dress got ruined, back to when Willa Fern Ashcroft still believed that a man could look at her, really look at her, and see something worth keeping. Copper Ridge, Colorado, September 1885. Population 412 people. 1 main road, 1 saloon, 1 church with a crooked cross on top, 24 horses that knew this town better than most of the humans in it, and 1 bakery that wasn't really a bakery. It was just Willa's kitchen window, open every morning before sunrise, a wooden ledge, and whatever she'd pulled out of the oven the night before, sourdough, cornbread, sweet rolls, when she was feeling generous, which was most days. People came with coins. She took what they could spare. Some days that was nothing, and she gave them the bread anyway. That was Willa, 24 years old, round-faced and strong-shouldered, hands that were always a little floury, a little roughed up, brown hair that never stayed where she put it, eyes that had this particular quality of making you feel like she was actually listening, not just waiting for her turn to talk. Actually, listening. The horses knew it too. She managed the stables for 3 different ranch owners on the east side of town, fed the animals before she fed herself, talked to them, not in a crazy way, in a way that made the horses calm down just being near her. Old Hector Briggs said his mare wouldn't let anyone else shoe her, said that horse could smell a good person from 40 yards out. Hector Briggs was not a man who gave out compliments easy, so that should tell you something. Copper Ridge was the kind of town that chewed people up. Mining towns always were. Men came through chasing silver and left behind nothing but debt and broken equipment and children they didn't stick around to name. The women stayed. Always the women who stayed, who rebuilt things, who kept the bread coming and the horses fed and the saloon from burning down on Saturday nights. Hattie Greer had owned that saloon for 11 years, 55 years old. Built like a woman who had survived things she wasn't going to tell you about. Gray-streaked hair pinned up severe, eyes that missed absolutely nothing, voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. She poured drinks and broke up fights and extended credit to people who didn't deserve it and cut off people who thought they did. She was the unofficial mayor of Copper Ridge. She'd have told you there was no such thing as an unofficial mayor. Then she'd have gone ahead and made a decision that affected the whole town and not asked anyone's permission. Willa had known Hattie since she was 14, since the year everything fell apart. But that's a different story. We'll get to it. The point is, Willa had a good life, not a glamorous life, not a life that anyone was going to write poems about, but a good one, useful, warm. She knew every person in Copper Ridge by name and most of their horses by name too, and she made bread that made people close their eyes when they ate it. That was a life. And then Declan Rourke walked into it. He arrived in Copper Ridge on a Thursday in January 1885, 8 months before everything happened. Tall, dark-haired, jaw like it was carved out of the same red rock that surrounded the town. He rode a black horse that was too good for Copper Ridge, the kind of horse that made you look at the rider and think this man has money. He did have money. He had the biggest operating ranch in the county, 200 head of cattle, 18 hired hands, a house with a porch that wrapped around all four sides. People talked about that porch. He was 31 years old and he had never apparently bothered to get married. The women of Copper Ridge had opinions about this. Very loud opinions, expressed at every possible occasion. Willa was not interested. She noticed he was handsome. She wasn't blind. She also noticed that handsome men in her experience tended to know it, which made them exhausting. She had bread to bake and horses to feed, and she did not have time for exhausting. Then his horse got a stone bruise. He brought the animal to the stables. She was the one there. She crouched down without being asked, ran her hands down the horse's leg, found the problem, fixed it. He stood there watching her. "You're good at that," he said. "I know," she said, and went back to work. He came back the next day, and the next. Not always with a horse problem, sometimes just to talk. He'd lean against the fence post, that specific lean like he had all the time in the world, and ask her things. About the bread, about the town, about what she thought of the new assay results on the Western Ridge. Nobody had ever asked Willa what she thought about assay results before. She had opinions. Turned out she had a lot of opinions. He listened to all of them. And that right there was the thing. Not the jaw, not the porch, not the money, which she didn't care about. It was the listening. It was the way he leaned toward her when she talked instead of away. The way he laughed at the things she said that were actually funny instead of just being polite about it. She started looking forward to Thursday mornings. Then, every morning. He asked her to dinner in March. She said yes before she finished thinking about it. 8 months. 8 months of dinners at the hotel restaurant, of walks along the ridge at sunset, of him sitting on the fence while she worked and talking about everything and nothing, of learning each other slowly the way you learn a new landscape first, the big shapes, then the details, then the things that are only visible in certain light. She learned that he was from Missouri originally, that his father had been a drunk and his mother had been the strongest person he knew, that he'd come west at 19 with $40 and a mule and had built everything himself. She respected that. She understood building things yourself. She told him about her father, Silas Ashcroft, who had been a miner and a dreamer, and the kind of man who could make a cold cabin feel warm just by walking into it. Who had died when she was 14, shot by road agents on the trail back from the assay office carrying a worthless claim and $12 cash. She had not talked about her father to anyone in years. She talked to Declan for an hour about him, and at the end of it, Declan put his hand over hers on the fence rail and didn't say anything, just sat there. And somehow that was exactly right. So, when he got down on one knee in front of Hattie's saloon in April in front of half the town, because Declan Rourke apparently did not do anything quietly, Willa's first instinct was to look around and make sure he was kneeling in front of the right person. He was. She said yes, again before she finished thinking about it. The town cheered. Hattie Greer, watching from the saloon doorway, did not cheer. She raised her glass. One slow, deliberate movement. Her eyes on Willa the whole time. Not quite a smile. Something more complicated than a smile. Willa didn't notice. She was too busy being the happiest she'd been in 10 years. The wedding was planned for September. 6 months to prepare. Which sounded like a lot until suddenly it was August, and there were still 47 things left to do. The dress came from Denver. It took 6 weeks to arrive, and when the box was finally opened in Hattie's back room, because Hattie had a back room where important things happened, Willa stood there in it and something happened to her face, something she didn't have a name for. Joy, maybe, but more specific than that. The particular joy of a woman who has told herself for a long time that she doesn't need beautiful things, and then sees herself in something beautiful and realizes she was lying to herself. The dress was white cotton lawn with eyelet trim. Simple. But it fit her like it had been made for her specifically, which it had because she'd sent her measurements and the dressmaker in Denver had listened to them. "Well," Hattie said, looking at her. "Well, what?" "Nothing." A pause. "You look—" "Hattie, you don't do compliments. Don't start now. It's unsettling." "I was going to say you look like yourself, which is—" Hattie stopped. "Just make sure he deserves it." Willa laughed. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said." That wasn't romantic. That was a warning. But Willa wasn't really listening. She was looking at herself in the small square mirror propped against the wall, and thinking for the first time in a long time that she was enough, that she was more than enough, that this was happening and it was real, and she had earned something good. The dress went back in the box. The cake was planned 3 tiers vanilla bean elderflower frosting. Willa made it herself, obviously. 80 guests, the whole town. Everything was ready. The night before the wedding, September 14th, 1885. Willa couldn't sleep, which was normal. She was getting married tomorrow. Sleep was not the point. She got up around 2 in the morning, decided she'd go check on the wedding cake. She'd left it in the cool storage room behind the church because her kitchen wasn't big enough. Also decided she'd check on her horse because she always checked on her horse when she couldn't sleep, and because old Murphy had been favoring his left foreleg and she wanted to make sure he was all right. The path from her place took her past Declan's ranch house. She wasn't planning to stop. She wasn't trying to see him before the wedding she actually believed in. That particular superstition had told him so, and he'd laughed and said he wasn't superstitious, and she'd said that's because superstitions exist to protect people from their own bad decisions, which had made him laugh harder. She was just walking past. But there was a light in the back room. And voices. And because she was Willa Fern Ashcroft, who had grown up in a town where sounds in the night meant things, she stopped. She told herself later she almost didn't listen. Almost. 2 voices, Declan, and a man she didn't recognize, low-graveled, deliberate. A business voice. Timelines moved up. Vance is getting nervous about the northern parcel. And Declan. Vance can wait. 1 more day doesn't change anything. And the woman. A pause. Handled tomorrow. Once it's done, she won't have any claim. The land reverts. The Ashcroft stake goes to next of kin, and next of kin becomes me. She know about the vein. She doesn't know anything. Silence. Then, her father found it first, Rourke. That's not nothing. And Declan very quiet, very calm. Her father's dead. Willa didn't move for a long time. The light stayed on in the back room. The voices kept talking. She couldn't hear them anymore. There was something wrong with her ears, or something wrong with the air, or something wrong with the entire night, which had been ordinary 10 minutes ago and was now. She walked away. Not running. Walking. Carefully. Like the ground might not hold if she moved too fast. She went to the stable. Old Murphy lifted his head when she came in. She put her forehead against his neck and stood there in the dark, smelling horse and hay and the particular dry, cold smell of a September night in Colorado. The land reverts. The Ashcroft stake. Her father's dead. She stood there for a long time, part of her. The part that had spent 8 months trusting this man, that had told him about her father for an entire hour, that had said yes before she finished thinking. That part said, "You misheard. You were tired. It's 2 in the morning and you're nervous and you misheard." Another part of her said nothing at all, just listened. She knew what she'd heard. She also knew, and this was the part that would keep her awake until dawn, that she didn't know what to do with it. If she said something now the night before the wedding, what happened? If she didn't say something, what happened? If he loved her and she'd misunderstood, if he didn't love her and she hadn't. She sat down in the hay next to old Murphy's feet. The horse lowered his big head and blew warm air onto the top of her head. She made a decision. Tomorrow. She would see what tomorrow looked like. She would walk into that church and she would look at his face when she came down that aisle, and she would know. She was good at reading things, horses, people, the way a landscape changed when something was wrong underground. She would know. She didn't sleep. The sun came up. She put on the dress. The whole town was there. That was the thing about Copper Ridge weddings. They weren't events for the couple. They were events for everyone. Because nothing else happened here. There was work and there was church and there was Hattie's saloon, and occasionally someone got married or someone died, and both events got the same level of attendance. 80 people crowded into and around the church. Spill over onto the road. Old Hector Briggs in his good hat, which he only wore for funerals and weddings, and had worn for both kinds of events so many times that most people associated that hat with dread. The cake was on the table outside. 3 tiers. Perfect. Willa stood at the back of the church in her white dress, holding a small bunch of whatever wildflowers she'd been able to find that morning, dried-looking, a little wilted because it was September in Colorado, and wildflowers in September in Colorado had given up. And she thought, okay. Here we go." Declan was at the front. He looked exactly right. That was the terrible thing. He stood there in his good coat and his clean shirt and his jaw that was carved from red rock, and he looked like a man waiting to get married. He looked like everything she'd imagined. She started walking. He watched her come, and she watched his face. She was looking for something, some crack, some flicker, the thing that would tell her what the night before had meant. His eyes on her, that long, slow look from the back of the church to the front. She saw it. Not love. Calculation. Just for a second. Half a second. The speed of a man checking something off a list. She saw it. And then it was gone. Replaced by the smile. The warm, practiced smile that she had spent 8 months believing was just for her. She stopped walking. Not dramatically. Just stopped. 3 rows from the front. The music kept going for a moment, then stuttered. Then stopped too. Everyone looked at her. Declan's smile didn't move. "Willa." His voice easy, warm, perfectly controlled. She didn't say anything. And something happened in his face then, something impatient. The smile held, but the thing behind his eyes shifted. A man who needed this done, who had a schedule, who had not accounted for her stopping in the middle of the aisle. He looked at her, top to bottom. And then, because impatience makes people careless, because being a certain kind of man for a long time makes you forget that other people are in the room, he said it. "I don't know what you're doing," he said. Quiet, but not quiet enough. "But you're making a scene," and frankly, a pause. A small, ugly pause. "You're embarrassing yourself more than you know." Someone in the church inhaled. "This is—" He stopped. Started again. Glanced around at the crowd like they might help him. "I thought—" And then, because he was cornered and cornered men say the thing they know will land, "I thought you understood what you were. I don't know why you thought this, a gesture, at her, at the dress, at all of her, was going to work." 80 people. Total silence. Willa felt it, the whole room holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do. Whether she would cry, whether she would beg, whether she would make this easier for him by falling apart. She did not fall apart. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she turned around, slowly, and walked back out the door. Same pace she came in, back straight, wildflowers still in her hand. She heard the murmuring start behind her, heard a woman's voice, unfamiliar from out of town, say something, and then movement. And then she was outside, and the sun hit her like a physical thing, and she kept walking. She heard behind her the church doors open again, didn't look back. She found out later what happened after she left. A girl, Josephine Vance, from the town 20 miles east, had walked up to stand beside Declan at the front of the church. Already dressed, already planned, already known by him. The whole wedding, the dress, the cake, the 80 guests. None of it had been for Willa. It had been a performance, a way to end a thing he'd started for other reasons. A clean, public, efficient disposal. She was not the bride who got left. She was the obstacle that got moved. She walked. Copper Ridge disappeared behind her. The road turned to trail, turned to bare rock, turned to the dry scrub and burned red earth of the open plain. The wedding dress picking up dust at the hem, the wildflowers slowly dying in her fist. She walked until her good shoes gave her blisters. Then she kept walking. The sky turned colors. Afternoon. Then late afternoon, the shadows going long and orange across the rock. She ended up where she always ended up when things broke. Her father's cabin. Silas Ashcroft had built it himself 30 years before. 2 rooms, plank floors, a stone fireplace that smoked if the wind was from the north, a porch about the size of a generous thought. He'd died in it, in a manner of speaking. He'd died on the road, but she'd always thought of his death as happening here in this cabin, because this was where the life he'd built was, and when the life ends, the place ends with it. She hadn't been back in years. It showed. The porch step had given way. One of the window shutters hung at an angle. The door didn't close right. Inside was dim and dust thick. She could see the shapes of things she remembered but roughed over, hazed, like a memory going soft at the edges. The table he'd built, the shelf where he kept his survey books, the hook on the wall where he hung his coat. She stood in the doorway for a long time. Then she went inside. She set the wildflowers on the table, which was a strange thing to do, and she knew it. But they were the only thing she had that was clean, and she wanted something clean in here. Then she sat down on the floor. And the thing she'd been holding since 2 in the morning, since the voice through the window, the schedule her father's dead, that thing came loose. She pressed her fist against her mouth and cried. Not gentle crying, not graceful movie-style crying that looks good in low light. The other kind, the heaving, airless kind, the kind that takes everything else in the room hostage. She cried for Declan Rourke, who had looked at her with calculation. She cried for the 8 months she'd spent believing something that wasn't there. She cried for the dress and the cake and the 80 people who had watched her walk out. She cried for her father, which surprised her. But there it was. Silas Ashcroft dead at 47, shot for $12, and a claim that went nowhere, and she had been 14 and had not let herself cry properly then because there was no one to take care of things if she stopped. She cried until she had nothing left. Then she sat in the quiet dust. The sun was setting through the crooked shutter. Orange-red. The same color as the road, as the dirt, as everything in this part of Colorado that had been baked long enough to give up any other color. She leaned her head back against the wall and slept. She woke in the dark to the sound of nothing. Which was the thing about out here? No town sounds, no horses or voices or the low perpetual hum of people living near each other, just wind and her own breathing and the creak of the cabin settling. She lay on the hard floor in her wedding dress and stared at the ceiling she couldn't see and thought, now what? Not a question, a statement. The kind of thought that has given up on punctuation. Now what? She had no plan. She had a wedding dress and blisters and a father's cabin falling apart around her, and the specific low-grade horror of knowing that 80 people had watched something happen to her today and would be talking about it for years. She had nothing. She pushed herself up. Her back ached from the floor. Her feet ached from the walking. Everything ached. She stood, steadied herself with one hand on the wall. The wall moved. Not much. A few inches, but enough the old plank siding shivered, shifted, and a section near the floor came loose with a hollow sound. She grabbed the lamp from the table. There were still matches dry enough, miracle, and lit it. Crouched down. The plank had pulled away from the frame. Behind it, not just the insulating sawdust and dead spiders she expected, was a gap, bigger than a gap. An opening, the top of a frame, a door built into the floor. She pulled the loose plank further. Found the edge of a hatch. Rope handle. She pulled it. It came up. Cold air. Dark. The particular smell of deep earth, clay, and mineral, and something almost sweet that she couldn't name. Stairs. Going down. She went down. Obviously she went down. Anyone who says they would have stopped right there and gone back to sleep on the floor is lying. The lamp threw light down ahead of her. 7 steps. 8. The ceiling lowering the walls, going from plank to raw earth, and then a room. Not large, the size of her kitchen, but solid, the walls braced with timber. A bed frame, real wood, not rope, with a rolled blanket on it that had gone stiff with cold and time. A trunk. 3 crates stacked against the far wall, sealed with wax. Hooks on the wall with things hanging from them, tools, a leather satchel, what she recognized as a holster. And on the small table against the wall, a lantern, a tinderbox, and a book. Leather-covered, worn at the corners. Tied shut with a cord. She crossed to it, picked it up, opened it. Her father's handwriting. She knew it immediately, cramped and slanted like he was always in a hurry, which he always was. Pages of it, dense and small. Notes, diagrams, numbers. She turned to the first page. Survey log, Western Ridge parcel, begun April 1871. She turned pages. More survey notes. Sketches of rock formations. Numbers she didn't understand. The careful record of a man who had been looking for something for a long time. She turned to the last written page and stopped. Because this page was different. This page was not survey notes. Clara. She blinked. Read it again. Willa. He'd crossed out Clara, which had been her mother's name, and written Willa above it, like he'd started writing and then remembered who he was writing to. If you're reading this, it means I've gone and left you to figure things out on your own. I'm sorry for that. I tried to set things up so you wouldn't have to figure out too much. The hatch behind the south wall plank, you found it. Good girl. I always knew you'd find it. What's in this room is yours. The crates have provisions, should be good for a year if kept sealed. The trunk has tools and what you'll need to get started. The satchel on the wall, there's a document inside. Important one. The land on the Western Ridge parcel section 4 through 7 I registered the claim. Properly at the county office, 1873. That claim is filed in your name, Willa Fern Ashcroft. Has been since you were 12 years old. I don't know who's going to want that land. I know someone will eventually. There's silver in that ridge. I know it even if I couldn't prove it yet. I prepared this room for you, not for me. I never needed a place to hide. But I knew you might. Don't let them make you small, Willa. Don't let them tell you what you're worth. You're an Ashcroft. We build things. We don't let them be taken. The rest is in the satchel. Willa sat down on this cold stone floor, the lamp burning beside her father's handwriting in her hands. He had known. Not about Declan Rourke specifically, he couldn't have known that. He'd been dead for 10 years. But he'd known that something would come, that someone would come, that the land was worth something and that people who wanted things didn't tend to ask nicely for them. He had built her a room. He had registered the land claim in her name when she was 12 years old. He had written her a letter and left it here in the dark for 10 years waiting for the night she would need it. She held the letter against her chest. Outside, somewhere above, past the plank floor and the ruined porch and the dark Colorado sky, the world was doing whatever it was doing. People in Copper Ridge were talking about her. Declan Rourke was making plans. The dress was dirty and the cake had been eaten, and the thing she'd thought was her life had turned out to be something else entirely. Down here, there was just her father's handwriting, and a room he'd built, and the slow, specific, bone-deep understanding that she was not in fact alone. She had never been alone. She was an Ashcroft, and Ashcrofts built things. She opened the satchel. The document was there. Folded, careful, tied with twine dry as bone, the kind of paper that survives a decade in a sealed room because someone prepared it properly. The county registration seal still clear. Her name, Willa Fern Ashcroft, in the clerk's formal hand. The Western Ridge parcel, sections 4 through 7. The same land Declan Rourke had spent 8 months planning to take from her. She looked at it for a long time. Then she folded it back up, put it in the satchel, put the satchel on her lap, opened the crates, found what her father had said she would provision sealed right. Dry goods, salt, cornmeal, dried meat. Enough. More than enough. The trunk tools, a good hunting knife, a compass, a smaller revolver than she'd ever handled with a box of cartridges wrapped in oilcloth, a canteen, a coil of rope, and under all of that a small cloth bag that clinked when she moved it. She opened it. Gold, not a fortune, but real. Enough. The savings of a man who'd spent 20 years working alone in the dirt and keeping what he found and not spending it on things he didn't need. She sat in the room her father had built, holding his gold in her lap, in her dirty wedding dress, with her blisters and her ruined wildflowers and the specific wreckage of the day sitting somewhere up above her where she couldn't see it anymore. She made a decision. Not today. Today she would sleep. But starting tomorrow she was going to figure out exactly what she was capable of. And then she was going to do it. Every last bit of it. She blew out the lamp, lay down on the stiff rolled blanket, pulled it around her, and for the first time in 24 hours, she slept. Outside the cabin door in the dark on the first step of the broken porch sat Hattie Greer, a shawl around her shoulders, her boots still on, a tin cup of something that had long since gone cold in her hands. She'd followed Willa out of town at a distance, all the way here, watched the light go on in the window, watched it move downward somehow in a way she couldn't explain, watched it go out. She'd sat down on the step and waited. She wasn't going to knock. Willa didn't need knocking right now. Willa needed to be alone with whatever was happening inside that cabin, but she was going to sit here, through the night, just in case. Dawn came the way it always did on the Colorado plain, fast and without apology. Orange burning the edge of the world, cold air that smelled like sage and coming winter. The cabin door didn't open. Hattie stood up, knees aching, not as young as she used to be, sitting on broken steps in the cold. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Bread. That morning's bread from the hotel kitchen, traded for with 2 bits, and Hattie's particular manner of asking for things that made people not want to say no. She set it on the step, looked at the door one more moment, then she walked back toward Copper Ridge. She didn't leave a note. She didn't need to. Inside the cabin, 6 feet underground, Willa Fern Ashcroft slept through the entire thing. She would find the bread when she woke up. She would stand there looking at it for a long time. And she would know without being told, without any note or explanation, exactly who had put it there. And why. And somehow that would be the thing. Not the letter, not the gold, not the legal document with her name on it, the bread on the step. She would find the bread when she woke up. She would stand there looking at it for a long time. Then she would go back inside and start. The first rabbit got away, obviously. She'd been down in that hatch room for exactly one night, read 12 pages of her father's notebook, decided she was ready to hunt, which was in retrospect the specific kind of confidence that only exists before you've actually tried the thing. The rabbit looked at her. She looked at the rabbit. The rabbit left. She stood in the scrub with a bent wire snare in her hand and her dignity in pieces on the ground and thought Silas Ashcroft. You could have left more detailed instructions. The second morning, second rabbit also left. Third morning, third rabbit. She got it. Not graceful. Not the kind of moment you'd put in a story about a strong woman finding herself. It was loud and graceless, and she apologized to the rabbit out loud, which she knew was ridiculous, and she did it anyway, because she was alone. And alone meant no one was watching, and no one watching meant she could be exactly as ridiculous as the moment required. But she got it. And that night she had meat, real meat, hot. Cooked over a fire she'd built herself from wood she'd split herself with an axe that was slightly too large for her hands, and that she had swung anyway over and over until her palms blistered, and the blisters broke, and something underneath them hardened into something tougher than skin. She sat next to that fire, ate every bite, and said out loud to no one in particular, "Okay. One more day." That was how it started. Not a plan, not a transformation, not the kind of thing you could write down in a notebook under the heading, "How I Became Someone Different." Just one more day. Get through today. Tomorrow is its own problem. The hatch room became her real home. The cabin above was for weather shelter when the wind came sideways, storage for the things that couldn't get wet. But the room below was where she slept, where she read, where she kept the satchel with the documents tucked inside the oilcloth safe and dry and waiting, not forgotten, never forgotten, but set aside, because she couldn't think about Declan Rourke and county registries and the legal machinery of what came next while she was also learning how to stay alive through a Colorado winter. The mind only has so much room. She'd learned that fast. Fill it with too many problems at once and nothing gets solved. Pick the most urgent one. Solve that. Then move. The most urgent problem in October 1885 was not Declan Rourke. It was food. Silas Ashcroft's notebook had 47 pages. She read all of them, then read them again, then read certain pages so many times the paper went soft at the corners from her fingers. His handwriting was cramped and slanted like his thoughts moved faster than the pen which they always had. She remembered that about him. The way he talked, fast and certain like he'd already worked out 4 steps ahead and was impatiently narrating the first one to someone who was still on step 2. She could hear him. Reading the notebook, she could hear him so clearly it was almost unbearable, the particular rhythm of him. The way he'd say something practical and then slip sideways into something that wasn't practical at all, something almost philosophical like he'd forget for a moment he was writing a survival manual and remember instead that he was a man who thought about things. Water the spring on the north face runs clean even when the creek goes muddy. Get there before noon or the elk beat you to it. Fire the trick is the kindling, not the log. Women always try to light the log. Don't light the log. Light the kindling. The log will catch when it's ready. You can't force a log. You can only prepare the conditions. Snare placement 3 inches off the ground. Not 2, not 4. 3. I don't know why, I just know that's right. She smiled every time she read that last one. I don't know why. I just know that's right. That was so entirely Silas Ashcroft that it made her chest ache in 2 directions at once. November came in cold and fast and without apology. The plain hardened overnight. The scrub went silver gray. The sky turned that particular flat white that means the cold isn't done arriving, it's just sending advance notice, like a very polite disaster. And Willa learned things about herself, about her body, about what she was actually made of underneath the soft exterior that the world had apparently decided was the whole story. She was stronger than she looked. This shouldn't have surprised her. She'd been hauling flour sacks and managing horses and kneading bread dough since she was 16. But somewhere along the way, in the accumulation of small comments, sideways glances, the particular way certain people looked at her and then looked away, she'd absorbed the general impression that she was soft, that her body was a liability. That strength was something that lived in other people's frames, not hers. She'd been wrong. The axe swing she found within 10 days. Not the brute force version that one hurt, that one pulled something in her left shoulder that took a week to stop complaining. The right version. The one her father described in 3 sentences on page 14, pivot from the hips, let the weight of the axe do the work. Your job is direction, not force. She read it. Tried it. It didn't work. Read it again. Tried it differently. Closer. 3rd time. 4th time. 5th time it clicked. The axe fell true. The log split clean. And something in her body said, "Oh, that's how." After that it was automatic. Like a door had been unlocked that she hadn't known was closed. The horse was harder. There was a horse, she found it, or it found her on the 3rd day out. A dun-colored mare. Young. Not broken. Running loose on the eastern flat, probably separated from someone's gather in the chaos of late season. Maybe wild. Impossible to know. Willa did not try to catch her. She left the cabin door open one night with a pile of hay just inside the threshold. The mare ate the hay. The next night, Willa moved the hay further in, 2 feet inside the door. The horse stood outside and looked at the hay, looked at Willa, stepped inside, ate, left. The next night, Willa sat next to the hay. The horse stood outside and looked at all of it, the hay, the woman, the whole complicated arrangement for a very long time. Then stepped in, ate, left, came back. This went on for 2 weeks, each day a little more, a little closer. The horse's enormous velvet nose getting nearer and nearer to Willa's shoulder until one evening it just rested there, heavy and warm, the horse's breath against her ear. Willa didn't move, just sat. "I'm here. I'm not going to hurt you. We're just figuring this out together." She named the horse November, because that was the month, and because it seemed right to name something after the time it decided to trust you. December. She'd been out here 3 months. And Copper Ridge might as well have been a story she'd once heard about another woman's life. Sometimes she thought about it, standing at the North Face spring in the cold morning water so clear it looked like poured glass. She'd think about the main road at dusk, the saloon windows, that warm, ugly gold light spilling out into the dust, the sound of the town voices, horses, the distant ring of the smithy, all of it blurred together into the low, constant hum of people living near each other. She thought about Hattie. The bread on the step. No note, no words, just bread. And the dent in the dust where someone had sat all night. Don't let them make you small. Her father. In her head. Getting louder the quieter everything else got. Which was strange, actually. She'd expected the quiet to hollow her out. That's what she'd feared, the silence becoming an absence, becoming nothing. Becoming the sound of a woman who had nothing left and nobody coming. It didn't do that. The quiet did the opposite. It filled up, slowly at first, then all at once. The way a room fills with morning light, you don't see it happen moment to moment, and then suddenly it's bright and you wonder how it got that way. She started noticing things she'd never had time to notice before. The way frost formed on the south window in specific patterns, always the same basic structure, always completely different in detail. The way November's ears moved when she heard something Willa couldn't hear yet. The way the light on the plain at 3 in the afternoon in December was a color she didn't have a name for. Not gold, not white, not the flat gray of overcast. Something between all of them. Something specific to this place at this hour. She started looking forward to things. Small things. The fire in the morning. The first light. November's nose against her shoulder at feeding time. The notebook. She found the pages at the back in December. She'd read the notebook front to back a dozen times. But she'd always stopped at the survey notes, the technical pages, the ones she needed. She'd somehow treated the back section as private, which was strange because the whole notebook was her father's private thoughts, and she'd been reading them for 2 months. But something about the back pages she'd seen from a glance that they weren't technical, that they were different, had made her hesitant. She read them on a cold December night with the fire burning low. What I know about being alone out here. First, it will try to convince you that discomfort means you're doing it wrong. That's a lie. Discomfort means you're doing something new. New things hurt until they don't. Second, it will try to convince you that needing to cry means you're weak. Also a lie. Crying is the pressure valve. Use it. Otherwise, something else breaks something you can't fix as easy. Third, and this is the one nobody tells you, the hardest part of being alone is not the cold or the hunger or the work. The hardest part is the silence. Real silence. The kind where there's no one coming, no voice to tell you what to do, no one to be brave for or careful for or responsible to. Just you. And every decision yours. That silence feels like drowning at first, then like floating. Then if you give it enough time, like home. Give it time. All the time it needs. Don't rush back to the noise before you know who you are in the quiet. She sat with that for a long time. The fire popped. November shifted in the lean-to. Outside the plane was absolutely still. Then, like home. She folded the notebook closed, looked at the ceiling, thought, he knew. He knew exactly what this would be. He wrote it down and left it here for me. A man who had been dead for 10 years had known exactly what she would need, and had provided it. She pressed the notebook against her chest, held it there, didn't cry, not because she was being strong, but because she'd used that particular pressure valve 3 times this week already, and she was genuinely okay right now. Present, grounded, in the specific good way of a woman who is alone and has stopped fighting the alone and started living inside it. Give it time. She had time. She was going to use every bit of it. Christmas came without announcing itself. She figured it was around the right time, the angle of the light, the depth of the cold, the particular blue-black quality of the nights. She'd lost track of the exact date somewhere in November. The days had stopped being named. They were just the day with the big kill, the day November spooked at a fox, the day the south window frosted in a pattern that looked almost like a tree. She made cornbread from the crates, lit both candles in the hatch room, talked to her father. Not like she'd lost her mind, she was clear on the fact that he wasn't there. But she talked to him the way you talk to someone when you're alone with something they left you and you want them to know you're using it well. That the thing they made mattered. That it's holding. November figured out the lean-to latch, she said. From the inside. I don't know how. I watched her do it twice and I still don't entirely understand the mechanics. You'd have loved her. Silence. Fire. The snare placement was right. 3 inches. I've tried 2 and I've tried 4. 3 is right. I don't know why either. Silence. I'm not ready to go back yet. She looked at the ceiling. I know what's waiting. I know what I have in the satchel and what it means and what I'm going to have to do with it. I need to be more ready than I am. I need to be the kind of ready where, when I walk into that room and put that document on the table, nobody looks at me the way... She stopped. Started again. Nobody looks at me the way he did, in that church, like I was something to be handled. A pause. I need to walk in there like a woman who has been handling things herself for a very long time, which I have been. I just need to also look like it. She blew out 1 candle, saved it. I'm working on it, she said, then lay down and slept the best she'd slept in months. January 1886. 4 months out. The body had completely stopped complaining. That was the clearest sign, not the muscles or the calluses or the way she could now split a full cord of wood without her shoulders protesting. It was the silence from inside, the absence of the daily argument between what she was doing and what her body thought it was capable of. That argument was over. She'd won. And into the space where the argument used to be came something else, something she didn't have an immediate name for. It wasn't confidence exactly. Confidence had always suggested something she performed for other people. This was internal, structural, the way a building is solid not because it looks solid from the outside, but because the joinery is right all the way through. She was right all the way through. She noticed it in small ways, the way she moved through the cabin-efficient, no-wasted steps, the way she read the weather now without thinking about it, the smell of the air, the behavior of the birds, the particular way November's ears tracked north when pressure was dropping, the way she'd stopped checking over her shoulder when she was outside. She belonged here, not forever. She knew that. There was a life waiting in Copper Ridge, a reckoning, a document, a fight she was going to have to finish. But for now, for January, she belonged exactly here. She heard him before she saw him. Footsteps. Hard ground. Not trying to be quiet, which was either confidence or stupidity in her experience. Those two things shared a body about 60% of the time, and the only way to tell them apart was to wait and see what the person did when things got complicated. She was splitting wood behind the cabin. He came around the south corner and stopped. Medium height, weathered face, eyes doing that thing trying to look easy, not managing it. A man who had been told this errand would be simple and was already revising that estimate. She kept splitting wood. "Help you," she said, looking for the Ashcroft place. Found it. He looked at her, at the axe, at the stack of split wood that was, she knew, considerably larger than he'd expected. "You're the woman." "I'm a woman, yes. Declan Rourke sent me." The axe came down. Clean split. She set another log. "Did he?" "Name's Court Denny." Said like it should mean something. "Court Denny," she repeated, neutral, giving him nothing. "I'm here about the land claim, on the Western Ridge." "What about it?" "Mr. Rourke believes there's a registered document that affects his interests. He'd like to discuss the matter." She set another log. "He sent you to discuss?" "That's right. From town. In January." "Yes." 7 miles. "Yes, ma'am." She stopped splitting. Looked at him properly for the first time. Took him in the coat, the boots, the way he was standing. Not threatening. Tired, maybe. A little uncomfortable. A man doing a job he'd been told was easy and was discovering was not. "How much is he paying you?" she said. A pause. "That's not... I'm asking because you don't look like a man who's being paid enough for January in the cold." She leaned on the axe handle. "You look like a man who was told this would take an afternoon." Court Denny said nothing. "He wants the copy," she said. "The document I have here." Silence. "I'm going to tell you what I told myself 4 months ago when I was making decisions I didn't know how to make yet." She looked at him steadily. "The right move is rarely the comfortable one. It's usually the one that costs you something now but doesn't cost you everything later." He shifted his weight. "I'm just here to... I know what you're here for." She picked up the axe. "Here's what I'm offering instead. Whatever he's paying you, I'll double it. Right now. From the gold in that room." She nodded toward the cabin. "Not to bring him anything, not to fight anyone, just to ride to the county seat with me in March. Sign your name on a witness statement about this conversation. About the fact that you were sent here and what you were sent to find." Dead silence. The wind moved across the plain. November's head appeared around the lean-to corner watching. "That's," Court started. "The truth," Willa said. "I'm asking you to tell the truth in a room with a legal seal on the door. If the truth favors Declan Rourke, you've got nothing to worry about. If it doesn't..." She looked at him. "Then you want to be the man who told it, not the man who helped hide it." Court Denny stood in the January cold, looked at her, looked at the stack of wood, looked at November, who was still watching him with the serene judgment of a horse that has decided she has opinions about people. "He's not going to like this," Court said. "No," Willa agreed. "He's not." A long pause. The longest pause. She didn't fill it. She'd learned 4 months of silence had taught her that the urge to fill a pause is almost always wrong. Let the pause breathe. Let the other person sit in it. Let the silence do its work. "Double," Court said finally. "Double." "In writing?" "In writing. Signed today." He nodded. One slow dip of his head. The nod of a man who has surprised himself. "All right," he said. He left an hour later with a signed agreement in his coat pocket and a counting of the gold that satisfied them both. Willa watched him go until he was small on the plain and then gone. Then she sat down on the chopping block. Let her heart do what it wanted for about 3 minutes, which was considerable, because she'd been very calm out there. Very level. The kind of level that costs something that borrows from somewhere deep and has to be paid back. She was allowed to collect the debt now that he was gone. 3 minutes of her heart racing and her hands shaking slightly and her brain catching up to what she'd just done. She'd just turned Declan Rourke's weapon into her own. She'd just taken the man he sent to take from her and pointed him in the opposite direction. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't picked up the rifle. She'd just thought, clearly, in the moment, like a woman who had spent 4 months alone with her father's handwriting and had learned to take the problem in front of her and find the angle that nobody expected. The right move is rarely the comfortable one. She hadn't known she was going to say that until it came out. But it was true, and she was going to need to remember it. February. 5 months out. And February was hard in a different way than everything before it. Not the body. The body was fine. The body had stopped being a problem and started being a tool. She moved through the days with an efficiency that would have been unrecognizable to September's Willa, the woman in the white dress who had blisters from a short walk and couldn't start a fire on the first try. February was hard because of the quiet. Not the good quiet, not the floating quiet, the home quiet that her father had described. The lonely quiet. She was lonely. She had been lonely before and ignored it in the town, in the crowd, in the 8 months with Declan Rourke, where she'd talked and laughed and shared herself, and had been, she now understood, entirely alone the whole time. But this was different. This was the honest loneliness of a person who knows what genuine connection feels like and does not have it right now and is not pretending otherwise. She missed someone to say things to, not important things, the small things, the way November had figured out the lean-to latch, the frost patterns on the south window. The passage in the notebook she wanted to argue with, page 31, where her father had written something about patience that she thought was right in the abstract and wrong in practice, and she had 17 things to say about it and no one to say them to. She talked to November, at length, about all of it. November was an excellent listener, but still. She heard the footsteps on a cold mid-February afternoon. Different from Court Denny's. Lighter. Hesitant. The footsteps of someone who is not sure they should be here, who has been walking for a long time and is now at the edge of somewhere and is standing there deciding whether the last few steps are a mistake. Willa turned around. A woman, young, maybe 22, thin in the way of someone who hasn't been eating well for weeks, dark circles under her eyes, a good coat gone shabby at the elbows, brown hair escaping from a pin that had surrendered. Shoes. Willa's eyes went to the shoes immediately completely wrong for 7 miles of trail in February. Josephine Vance, standing at the edge of the scrub, looking at Willa like she'd already prepared for the worst and was waiting to receive it. The list of things Willa could have said was long. She'd had 5 months of quiet to compose it. She said none of them. "You walked from town," she said instead. Joe blinked, like she'd expected something else. "Yes. 7 miles. I know. In those shoes." Joe looked down. Back up. "I know." Willa looked at her. All of her. The circles under the eyes and the wrong shoes and the particular expression of a woman who has just done the bravest thing she's done in months and is now terrified it was the wrong call. She knew that expression. She'd worn it herself, walking out of a church. "Come inside," she said. "There's cornbread." Joe ate 3 pieces without talking. Willa let her. She understood hunger. Real hunger, the behind-the-eyes kind, the kind that narrows the world down to just the plate in front of you. You don't talk when you're that hungry, you just eat. The talking can wait. The 3rd piece gone. Plate empty. Joe put her hands in her lap. "I didn't know," she said, "what he'd done, the whole of it." Willa said nothing. "I knew there had been someone before me. I didn't know not the planning of it, not that it was deliberate." She looked at the table. "I found out from his foreman, by accident, 2 weeks ago. And now you know. Now I know." A pause. "He's doing it again," Joe said. "My father's land, northern section. There's a claim my father registered in '79 and Declan has a lawyer from Denver building a case that the filing was procedurally improper." She stopped. "Same thing, isn't it?" "Different name on the land," Willa said. "Same architecture." Joe pressed her lips together hard. "I left this morning, without telling him, just left." "Where are you going?" Joe looked up. Just looked. The answer was in the look. "Oh." "You came here," Willa said slowly. "You walked 7 miles in February, in those shoes, to me. I didn't know where else to go." Her voice steady, but just barely. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know what I was part of, even if I didn't understand all of it." "Stop." Joe stopped. Willa looked at her for a long moment. At the circles, the shoes, the coat, the particular expression of a woman who has run toward something because everything behind her was worse than the uncertainty ahead. "You're not asking me to forget anything," Willa said. "You're asking me to look at what's in front of me." A pause. "Which is a woman who walked 7 miles to not be somewhere anymore." Joe said nothing. "I know something about that," Willa said quietly, and got up to cut more cornbread. Joe stayed. This was objectively not the plan. The plan had been Willa. Alone. Get ready. March. County seat. End it. The plan had not included a house guest. But Joe Vance sat at the table in her wrong shoes and ate cornbread and did not ask for sympathy and did not perform helplessness. And the next morning, without being asked, got up before Willa and started the fire. Badly. The fire was bad. The kindling arrangement was wrong and the whole thing nearly smoked them out. "Light the kindling," Willa said from the doorway. "Not the log." Joe looked at the smoking mess. "There's a difference. My father wrote 3 sentences about this. I will read them to you." Joe listened. Tried again. Better. "Can you ride?" Willa asked that afternoon. Joe looked at November. November looked back with her characteristic serene assessment. "A little. We'll fix that." "Where are we going?" "Back," Willa said. "March, both of us, with the document and Court Denny's witness statement and both our stories in the same room." She looked at Joe steadily. 2 women with the same man's fingerprints on the same scheme. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern, and patterns are what courts pay attention to. Joe was quiet for a moment. "He'll say we coordinated against him." "We are coordinating against him," Willa said. "Openly, with legal documentation. That's not a conspiracy. That's a case." Something shifted in Joe's face. Not quite a smile, but the shape of one, the outline of one. "All right," she said. "Teach me to ride." The last 2 weeks of February. Joe was spectacularly bad at riding. This was actually genuinely funny, not in a mean way, in the way of watching someone discover that their body does not automatically know how to do a thing they assumed would be intuitive. She fell off November 3 times on the first day. Each time she stood up, checked that nothing important was broken and climbed back on. Willa showed her the snare placement. 3 inches. Not 2. Not 4. Joe approached every new skill with the expression of someone taking a very important examination, executing each step with careful, deliberate attention. Slow, but thorough, which Willa thought was actually better than fast and careless. Fast and careless got you in trouble. Slow and thorough got you through the winter. Nights they sat by the fire, talking. Sometimes not. The easy mixture of both that only happens between people who have stopped performing for each other. Joe told her about Walter Vance. Stubborn. Not easy to love in the obvious ways, but present the kind of father who showed up, who stayed, who built things that lasted even when he didn't say much while building them. Willa told her about Silas, about the notebook, the hatch room, the letter, about 3 inches. Joe laughed at the 3 inches. A real laugh, the surprised kind, startled out of her. The kind you can't manufacture. It was the first time Willa had heard another person laugh in 5 months. It sounded like something returning to the world, some quality of the air that she hadn't realized was missing. She laughed too, and the cabin, which had been holding its breath for a long time, seemed to exhale. First morning of March. Cold. Clear. The sky that particular blue that Colorado reserves for days when something is about to change. Willa stood outside the cabin in her father's leather coat found in the trunk fitted for a broader frame but close enough to matter. The satchel over her shoulder, the oilcloth inside, the document with her name on it. Willa Fern Ashcroft. November bridled and ready beside her. Joe stood next to her in Willa's spare boots, her own shoes left behind in the cabin like a skin she was done with. They both looked at the road. 7 miles. A man with lawyers and money and 8 months of planning. A town full of people who had watched something happen and said nothing. "Ready," Willa said. Joe considered this honestly. "No. Me neither." A breath. "Let's go anyway," Willa said. She swung up onto November. Joe, with slightly more grace than the first attempt, which was still not much grace, got up behind her. They rode out. The sun was low and gold, the plain silver with cold. Behind them, the cabin sat quiet in its scrub, the broken porch, the crooked shutter, the hatch in the floor under the south wall, plank, the room below with the fire gone cold and the notebook on the table, and the 2 burned candle stubs, and every single night of the last 5 months folded up and stored there. She would come back. She knew that. But first Copper Ridge. First the room with the legal seal. First the document and the witness and the truth told out loud in a room full of people who had decided she was nothing. November moved into a canter. The town grew closer on the plain, and Willa Fern Ashcroft, who had left it with a ruined dress and a broken heart and absolutely nothing else, came back with everything she needed. She came back ready. They rode into Copper Ridge on a Tuesday morning, which mattered, because Tuesday was market day, which meant the main road was full, wagons pulling in from the surrounding ranches, stalls going up along the wooden sidewalk. The smell of coffee and sawdust and horse, and the particular dry, cold smell of early March in Colorado, that specific moment when winter is losing its grip but hasn't admitted it yet. When the ground is still hard but the air has something softer in it, something almost like a promise. Willa had chosen Tuesday deliberately, not for drama, for witnesses. An empty road means a private conversation. A private conversation means no record. And she had learned from 47 pages of her father's handwriting and 5 months of thinking in the dark that the only things that stuck were the things that happened in front of people, the things that got written down, the things that existed in the open air where everyone could see them and nobody could pretend they hadn't. So, Tuesday, market day, 80 people on the main road. She and Joe rode in on November together. Joe behind her, both of them upright, both of them forward-facing in the specific way of women who have decided something and are not entertaining second thoughts about it. Nobody noticed at first, which was exactly right, because the not noticing gave Willa 30 seconds to look at the town before the town looked at her, to take it in. The crooked cross on the church, the hotel with its peeling sign, the smithy already ringing Hector Briggs at it early, that rhythm of metal on metal that was the heartbeat of the town, steady and indifferent and permanent. Hattie's saloon, dark at this hour, wouldn't open until noon, but smoke from the back chimney, which meant Hattie was in there, which meant the coffee was on, which meant the one person in Copper Ridge that Willa needed to see first, the only person she'd thought about with something like longing during the worst nights of February, was 20 yards away behind a wooden door. She swung down from November, tied the horse to the rail. Joe slid down behind her, straightened her coat, looked at the town with the expression of someone bracing for impact. "Stop that," Willa said quietly. "Stop what?" "Looking like you're waiting to be punished." She looked at Joe steadily. "You're not here as his wife, you're here as a witness. Those are different things. Stand like the second one." Joe took a breath, pulled her shoulders back. "Better." "Good," Willa said, and knocked on the saloon door. 3 seconds. 5. The sound of boots on floorboards. That particular unhurried pace, the pace of a woman who opens her door when she decides to open it, and not a moment before. The door opened. Hattie Greer, gray-streaked hair already pinned up. Eyes that had been awake for hours, they always had that quality. Hattie's eyes, like sleep, was something she permitted herself rather than needed. She looked at Willa, then at Joe, then back at Willa. The whole assessment took about 4 seconds. Then she stepped back from the door. "Coffee's hot," she said. The back room of Hattie's saloon. 3 cups on the table. The smell of strong coffee and old wood, and the particular atmosphere of a room where serious things had been said by serious people over a long period of time. Willa laid the satchel down, unfolded the oilcloth with the care of someone handling a thing that has survived a great deal and deserves to survive more. Put the document on the table between them. Hattie picked it up. Read every word. Not skimming, she never skimmed. She read the way she did everything, complete methodical taking in the full thing before forming an opinion about any part of it. Her eyes moved line by line, the county seal, the filing date, the beneficiary name. She set it down. 1873, she said, when I was 12. And Rourke knew. He knew about the silver vein on the western ridge before he ever introduced himself to me. Willa wrapped both hands around her coffee cup, let the warmth into her palms. The whole courtship, every dinner, every walk, Every conversation where I thought someone was finally—" She stopped. He needed the land under his name. Marriage was the cleanest legal path. I was the most available option. Hattie was quiet. That specific Hattie quiet, which was not empty, was never empty, was the sound of a mind moving fast through things it wasn't ready to say out loud yet. "Court Denny," Willa said. "He came to the cabin in January. Rourke sent him to find the document." She paused. "He's signing a witness statement at the county office at 10 o'clock. "Denny's a man of inconsistent principle," Hattie said. "He's a man who wasn't paid enough and knew it." Willa looked at her. "I paid him more, to tell the truth, in a room with a legal seal." A pause. The truth was already true. I just gave it a better audience. Hattie looked at her for a long moment. That expression again. The one that wasn't quite a smile and contained more information than a smile usually did. The expression of a woman watching another woman do something she'd been quietly believing was possible. "Joe Vance," Hattie said, looking at Joe directly. The full assessment look. Joe met it without flinching. "Good." "Her father's North Section claim," Willa said. "Rourke's been building a procedural case against the filing. Same architecture as mine, different name on the land." "So we have 2 registered claims," Hattie said. 2 women, 1 pattern." "A pattern," Willa said, "is what courts look at when one incident isn't enough." Hattie picked up her coffee, drank, set it down with the deliberate care of a woman making a decision. "I'll come to the county office," she said. "I was hoping you'd say that." Hattie stood, smoothed her apron, looked once more at Joe, something passing between them. Not words, not quite warmth yet, but the beginning of the conditions for warmth. "There's something else," Willa said. Hattie looked at her. "The county office, Theodore Marsh." Willa paused. "You've known him a long time, 20 years. And his role officially as county clerk, the full scope of it." Hattie was very still for a moment. "Why are you asking me that?" she said, carefully. "Because I need to know what's available to us in that room," Willa said. "Before we walk in, I need to know every legal instrument we have, every person whose role matters." She looked at Hattie. "I've been thinking about this for 5 months. I don't want surprises." A long pause. Something moved in Hattie's face. Then she said, "Theodore Marsh is the county clerk, which means he records, he files, he stamps." A pause, deliberate, precise. "He is also, by the territorial statutes of Colorado, a commissioned notary of public record, which means documents executed in his presence carry the full weight of county court admissibility." Willa absorbed this. "And is there," she said slowly, "any other commissioned role in this county that we might be overlooking?" Hattie Greer looked at her for a very long moment. Then she reached into the pocket of her apron, pulled out a small card, worn at the edges, official seal still clear, set it on the table between them. Willa looked at it. Joe looked at it. Harriet May Greer, Justice of the Peace, County of Copper Ridge, commissioned 1882. "I was appointed," Hattie said, "when the previous justice retired, and there was no one else willing to do the job without payment the county couldn't afford." A pause. "I did not advertise the appointment, because in my experience authority is most effective when people don't know you have it until the moment you need to use it." Willa stared at the card, then at Hattie, then back at the card. 3 years, she said. "You've been the Justice of the Peace for 3 years." "And nobody—" "People know what they're told," Hattie said simply. "I didn't tell them." She picked up the card, put it back in her apron pocket. "I'm telling you." The room was very quiet. Then Joe said softly, "Good Lord." "Finish your coffee," Hattie said. "We have a 9 o'clock." The county office of Copper Ridge opened at 9. Theodore Marsh was already at his desk when they came in, thin, precise, spectacles, the posture of a man who believed in the correct ordering of things, papers, procedures, people, and found that belief confirmed daily by the chaos of everyone else. He looked up. 3 women, moving with purpose. He straightened his spectacles. "Miss—" He stopped, looked harder at Willa. "Miss Ashcroft." "Mr. Marsh?" She put the document on his desk. "I need a confirmation of registration on this claim. Western Ridge Parcel Sections 4 through 7, filed 1873. Silas Ashcroft beneficiary, Willa Fern Ashcroft. He picked it up, handled it with the specific reverence of a man who understood what papers were for, opened his ledger, found the page. His eyebrows rose the maximum increment for Theodore Marsh, who communicated primarily through precise adjustments of those eyebrows. This is, yes, he looked up. This has been a valid registered claim this entire— I know, she said. I need it confirmed on record, stamped, today. Of course, reaching for his pen. Is there a specific urgency? The door opened behind them. Declan Rourke, 914. With his lawyer from Denver, sharp coat, sharp eyes, papers already in hand. The whole presentation of a man who has arranged the outcome in advance and is here to collect it. He walked in. And stopped. The stop was, she'd be lying if she said it wasn't satisfying. It was deeply satisfying. The specific stop of a man whose mental model of the situation has just encountered reality and found them incompatible. His lawyer recovered faster. They always did. Mr. Marsh, stepping forward. We're here regarding the Western Ridge parcel, sections 4 through 7. My client has a claim of procedural precedence over the current filing based on— Your client, Hattie said from her position near the wall, has a claim of procedural precedence over nothing. The lawyer looked at Hattie. Hattie looked back. The lawyer made a rapid assessment, the kind that takes 2 seconds and involves reading everything available about a person from how they stand and where their hands are and what their eyes do when challenged. He read Hattie correctly, made the decision that she was not a woman to underestimate, adjusted his approach. Declan stepped forward, around his lawyer, looked at Willa directly, and she let herself feel it the full weight of what it meant to be looked at by this man. 8 months, dinners, walks, every conversation where she'd thought this is real, this is real, this is real. She let herself feel the whole of it. Then she put it down. He was just a man, across a room, who had made calculations and was now facing the consequences of them. Willa. His voice, warm, practiced, the same voice that had asked her what she thought about assay results and listened to her answer and made her feel for the first time in years like her thoughts were worth something. This isn't necessary. The registration confirmation— She didn't look away from him. It seems fairly necessary, yes. I mean, a controlled breath. Whatever you think you heard, I know what I heard, she said. I was standing outside your back room at 2 in the morning on the 14th of September. I heard you and your associate discuss the timeline, the land, the silver vein. She paused. I heard you say my father's name. Silence. Complete. Absolute. I heard you say he was dead, she said. Like it was a solved problem. Another pause. He was my father. Declan said nothing. You came to me, she said, with 8 months of patience and a very good performance of a man who had found something worth caring about. And I— She stopped. Let the honesty of it sit in the room. I believed you, completely. Because I wanted to. Because you listened to me talk about my father for an entire hour. And you put your hand over mine, and you didn't say anything, and I thought, here is a person who understands what it is to lose something. She took a breath. But you weren't listening, she said. You were calculating. There's a man I know who listens. He's been dead for 10 years. And he's still from beyond that a better man than you managed to be while standing right in front of me. Declan Rourke's jaw tightened. Something moved in his face, complicated, layered the expression of a man who is not entirely without conscience but has spent a long time overriding it. The document is valid, Theodore Marsh said, mild, precise, looking at his ledger rather than any of them, which was the kind of professional tact that deserved acknowledgement. Filed correctly, recorded properly. The beneficiary designation is current and legal. He looked up. There is no prior claim that supersedes it. The lawyer from Denver looked at his papers, then at Declan, then made the face of a man rapidly recalculating what this afternoon was going to cost him in reputation. Mr. Rourke, he said quietly. A moment. Declan didn't move, still looking at Willa. I could have, he started. No, she said. You couldn't have. Because what you wanted required that I not know my own value, and I know it now. She looked at him steadily. I knew it before I left. I just needed 5 months in the cold to remember I knew it." His lawyer touched his arm. "Mr. Rourke." Declan looked at his lawyer, then back at Willa. Something fell away from his face. Not the charm, the thing behind the charm. The mechanism, like watching a clock stop. He turned and walked out. His lawyer followed. The door closed. The room breathed. Willa stood very still. Her hands, she noticed, were shaking. Slightly. The fine tremor of a person who has been holding something very carefully for a very long time and has just been allowed to set it down. Joe stepped close beside her, their shoulders touching. "You all right?" Joe said quietly. "Ask me in a minute," Willa said. She breathed. 1 breath. 2. The shaking slowed. "All right," she said. "Yes." Joe nodded. Theodore Marsh stamped the document. The sound of it, that clean, definitive sound of a stamp meeting paper, of something becoming official, of a thing that had existed in the dark for 13 years, finally entering the light, was one of the best sounds Willa Fern Ashcroft had ever heard. Court Denny arrived at 10 o'clock exactly. She had not been entirely sure he would. 80% sure. Which sounds like a lot until you consider that the remaining 20% had been living in the back of her mind since January, quiet and persistent. The small voice that said he took your money and he'll take Rourke's next, and you'll be standing in that office alone, and you'll have been wrong about the one person you thought you'd read correctly. He walked through the door. Dusty coat. Same weathered face. Eyes that moved around the room in 4 seconds, taking in Willa Jo Hattie, Theodore Marsh, the stamped document on the desk, and landed on Willa with an expression that was as close to respect as Court Denny's face appeared to produce. "Document ready," he said. "On the desk," she said. He crossed to it. Read the witness statement she'd written in February by lamplight, every word chosen carefully, the language borrowed from her father's legal documents and adapted for this specific purpose. Read it through once, then again. Picked up the pen. Signed. Theodore Marsh stamped it, and it was done. Legally. Permanently. Irrevocably done. They came out of the county office into the March morning. The market still going, the town still being itself. The smithy still ringing, Copper Ridge indifferent to the fact that something important had just happened inside one of its buildings. Willa stood on the step and breathed the cold air. Hattie beside her. Joe. Court Denny, who tipped his hat once and walked away, which was the correct amount of ceremony for the situation. And then old Hector Briggs came down the sidewalk in his dread hat, worn for funerals, worn for weddings, worn, apparently now for ordinary Tuesday mornings, and stopped dead when he saw her. Stared. "Miss Ashcroft," he said, slowly. "Mr. Briggs." He looked at her for a long time. Taking in, she was aware the leather coat and the different posture and the quality of a woman who has been somewhere and come back changed by it in ways that are visible. "You look different," he said. "I am different," she said. He nodded. "Once. The economy of a man who has learned to mean everything he says precisely because he says so little." Then he walked on. Word moved through Copper Ridge fast. By noon, the general shape of it was known. Willa Ashcroft came back. The Western Ridge document. The county office. Rourke's lawyer left early. Something happened. By afternoon, the specific shape, the registered claim, the witness statement, Court Denny's signature, the stamp. The lawyer from Denver who had performed the rapid calculation of a man understanding he'd been retained for a losing position. Declan Rourke said nothing publicly, which was, she understood, its own kind of answer. A man with a good counter-argument makes it. A man without one goes quiet. He went quiet. The trouble came at 2 in the afternoon, because trouble always comes when you think the difficult part is finished. That is the thing about trouble. It has no respect for narrative convenience. It arrives on its own schedule, usually the worst possible one. She was standing outside Hattie's with Joe talking about nothing consequential, something about November's feed situation and whether the bay gelding they'd heard about in the next valley was worth the trip when she heard it. Horses, east end of the road, moving too fast, not the rhythm of travelers or traders, the rhythm of men with a purpose and no interest in being polite about it. She heard it before she saw it because she'd spent 5 months listening to November's ears, and November's ears had taught her to hear things earlier than she used to. 3 riders, coming in hard, the market crowd pulling back that instinctive ripple of a group of people deciding simultaneously to not be in the way of something. The lead rider pulled up in the middle of the road, looked around. His eyes went to the county office. Willa understood immediately. Completely. The way you understand something when all the pieces you've been holding separately suddenly show you their shape. Rourke. Not done. A plan B she hadn't accounted for. Not lawyers this time, these men weren't lawyers. These were men sent to do something about a stamped piece of paper before that stamped piece of paper could leave the building and become the kind of problem that couldn't be undone. Theodore Marsh was alone in that office. She was moving before she finished the thought. "Willa," Joe started. "Get Hattie," Willa said, already moving. "Tell her what's happening." She went around the back. Not the main road, the alley between the livery and the feed store. Narrow, dark, smelled like horse and old hay. She'd taken this alley as a child, cutting through to the stables on mornings when she was late and didn't want Hector Briggs to see her. She was slightly wider than she'd been at 14, made it work. Through the back door of the county building, unlocked because Theodore Marsh operated on the principle that county records should be accessible to county citizens, which was admirable in philosophy and occasionally inconvenient in practice. Into the back room. Theodore Marsh looked up, saw her face, stood up immediately. Because Theodore Marsh was a precise man, and precise men read situations accurately. 3 men, she said. East Road. They're coming for the document. He was already moving to the cabinet. The secondary. Lock it. The back cabinet. Right now. He did. She picked up the chair from the corner, simple. Wooden. Functional. Sat in the back room doorway where she could see the front door and the front door could see her. 30 seconds. Maybe less. The front door opened. The lead man. Medium build. Eyes doing the rapid scan of someone looking for a specific thing in an unfamiliar room. Landed on the desk. The stamp, the visible filing cabinets, not what he needed. "Can I help you?" Theodore Marsh said, perfectly mild, perfectly normal. The voice of a man for whom this was a completely ordinary afternoon. "The Western Ridge parcel documents." The man's voice flat, practiced, a voice that was used to getting things through the specific quality of its flatness. "The Ashcroft registration." "Those are filed county records," Theodore Marsh said. "Access to filed records requires a formal written request submitted to, 'I need them now.' That's not how the—" The man stepped toward the desk, and Willa stepped out of the back room doorway. The man stopped. She had the chair in both hands, not raised, not threatening technically, just held, the way a woman holds something when she wants you to think carefully about the fact that she's holding it. Her arms, after 5 months of splitting wood and hauling water and everything else, were not the arms of a woman who had spent those months doing nothing. This was visible. She knew it was visible. She'd chosen not to hide it. "Mr. Marsh was explaining the process," she said. The man looked at her, at the chair, at her arms, at the back room she'd come from, at the chair again. "Those records are official county property," she said. "Removing or damaging official county records is a federal offense. The man who sent you here knows that. He sent you anyway." She let that sit for a moment. "Think about what that means for how much he values your specific situation." Silence. "He's done with this county," she said. "He's cutting his losses. You're currently in a room holding someone else's loss for them." She tilted her head slightly. "You can put it down any time." The man looked at her for a long moment. She looked back. Steady, because she'd been steady in the cold when the first rabbit got away and the fire wouldn't start, and the silence was so loud it felt like drowning. She'd been steady with Court Denny in January and in the county office an hour ago, and she had not used up her steadiness yet. She had more. She would always have more now. The man left. She heard the horses go fast east, receding, and stood still until the sound was gone. Theodore Marsh exhaled, long, controlled, the exhale of a man who had maintained his composure through something that had required composure. He looked at Willa, at the chair. "Miss Ashcroft," he said. "Mr. Marsh, you were prepared to—" "I was holding a chair," she said. "There's a meaningful distinction between holding a chair and doing anything with it." He considered this. Is there... Philosophically, she said. Yes. He almost smiled. Theodore Marsh. Almost. She set the chair back in the corner. The document, she said. Locked. Safe. He paused. I'll have a copy made today and filed with the territorial office in Denver. Secondary record, in case anyone is inclined to revisit this. She looked at him. Thank you, she said. That's yes. Thank you. He nodded, picked up his pen, went back to work. Which was, she understood, Theodore Marsh's version of "you're welcome." Hattie was on the step when she came out, Joe beside her. And behind them the crowd that had gathered the way crowds gather in small towns when something is happening and nobody wants to admit they came specifically to watch. Hattie looked at Willa. 3 men on horses, Hattie said. Gone. The document. Locked and safe. Copy going to Denver. Hattie was quiet for a moment. You went through the livery alley, she said. I used to take it as a kid. Your father used to take it too. Said simply, like a fact she'd been carrying for a while and had decided this was the right moment to set down. When he was late to the assay office, which was often. A pause. He was always thinking about the next thing, moving fast in his mind. His feet had to catch up. Willa couldn't speak for a moment. The crowd around them, the market sounds, the smithy ringing. He was a good man, Hattie said. The kind that doesn't announce itself, just builds things, and trusts the things it builds. Willa pressed her lips together, nodded. That was all she had right then. It was enough. Declan Rourke left Copper Ridge 6 days later. Not in the night, not running. In the morning with a wagon and a hired man and whatever he'd decided was worth taking. The rest left behind the ranch, the equipment, the carefully constructed life of a man who had built on borrowed foundations and found out what happens when the foundations are called in. Willa was at the stable checking on old Murphy's foreleg when the wagon went past on the main road. She heard the wheels, looked up, watched him go. Felt not triumph, not satisfaction exactly, something quieter. The specific feeling of a thing returning to its proper order after a long time out of place. She looked down at Murphy's leg. Almost completely healed, she told him. Took long enough. Murphy flicked an ear. She went back to work. What came after was ordinary, which was actually the most extraordinary thing. She'd expected the aftermath to feel like resolution, the chord landing in the right key, the story arriving at its proper ending note. Instead, it was just mourning, specific, present, real. She walked through Copper Ridge, and it was her town again. Not the town where something happened to her. Her town. The one where she knew every name and most of the horses, where the crooked church cross had been crooked since before she was born and would be crooked after she was gone. Where the smithy rang the same rhythm it always had. People spoke to her differently, not with pity, not with that particular sideways sympathy that had coated everything before September. With something she hadn't been given before, not often, not freely. The quality of being taken seriously, of being understood as a person whose decisions had weight, whose presence in a room changed what was possible in that room. She'd always been kind. Now she was also known. Those two things together, she understood now, were what she'd been missing. Not romance, not a ranch. The simple fact of being fully seen by the place where she lived. She started building in April. The Western Ridge parcel. Her land. Sections 4 through 7 on the hand-drawn map she'd found in a leather notebook in a room her father built for her before she was old enough to need it. Raw land. Beautiful, in the particular way that raw land is beautiful, the beauty of potential rather than completion. She could see what it would be. She'd always been able to see shapes before they were finished. Her father had been the same way. She knew that now, from his notebook, from the way he wrote about things that didn't exist yet, as if they were already real and just waiting to be reached. Joe stayed, not discussed at length. It became true the way certain things become true incrementally, practically, through the daily accumulation of choices that add up to a life. Joe was Willa had discovered over 2 months of shared space, methodical in ways that complemented Willa's instinctive approach. Where Willa read a situation and moved, Joe measured twice. Where Willa trusted her hands, Joe made diagrams. Between them they built things that were both sound and efficient, which was better than either quality alone. Joe could ride November now without incident. She'd also somewhat mysteriously developed a rapport with the horse that November expressed by occasionally choosing Joe's company over Willa's, which Willa found both endearing and faintly insulting. "She likes you," Willa said one morning watching November follow Joe across the yard for no apparent reason. "Animals have good judgment," Joe said. "I know. That's why it's insulting," Joe laughed. And the sound of it free unguarded the laugh of a woman who had remembered how was one of the better sounds on the western ridge that spring. The Tuesday gatherings were Hattie's. She'd been running them quietly for 3 years. The back room of the saloon. Women of Copper Ridge, any who wanted to come. Practical things, basic bookkeeping, land rights as they applied to women in the territory, the specific legal instruments that existed and were available, and that nobody had bothered to explain to them. After March, more women came. Not just from Copper Ridge, from the surrounding ranches, from the mining camps, from the small isolated homesteads where women had been making decisions alone for years, with no framework for understanding their own rights. They came because word had moved. Word always moved. Willa started teaching the outdoor things. Not as a class, not formally. More like, here is what I know, here is how I know it, here is why it matters. Fire. The kindling, not the log. Don't try to light the log. The log catches when it's ready. Your job is to prepare the conditions. Water. The north face spring runs clean when the creek goes muddy. Get there before noon. Snare placement. 3 inches off the ground. Not 2, not 4. She said that every time. Every time someone wrote it down. She didn't know why 3 inches was right. Her father hadn't known either. But it was right. She'd proven it enough times now that she'd stopped questioning it and started trusting it. That she told them was the thing, not the specific measurements, the principle underneath them. There are things that work, she said, that you don't fully understand, and you have a choice. You can refuse to use them until you understand them, or you can trust the evidence and use them now and understand them later. She looked around the room. Most of the things that kept me alive last winter, I didn't understand. I just did them because the notebook said to, and then I saw that they worked and I kept doing them. A pause. Understanding caught up eventually, but surviving came first. The room quiet. Listening. "Nobody is coming to explain things to you before you need them," she said. "That's the thing I wish someone had told me earlier. The explanation and the need arrive at different times. So learn what you can before the need arrives. And when the need arrives anyway, and it will trust what you've learned even when you can't see why yet." After that session, 4 women asked her to teach them to shoot. She said yes to all 4. She went back to the cabin once. May. The plain already green in the low places where the snowmelt had come through. The scrub silver and new. The particular quality of May light in Colorado, clear and direct, no softness to it, just honest. She stood on the broken porch, looked at the crooked shutter, the door that didn't close right, the step that had given way years ago and never been fixed. She would fix it, this summer. She'd come back and fix all of it. This place deserved to be sound. She went inside, down the hatch. The room was the same, cold, still. The notebook on the table where she'd left it. The 2 burned candle stubs, the blanket on the bed frame, the hook on the wall with the holster. She sat on the edge of the bed, looked around at what 5 months had looked like from the inside. She was grateful. Not in a complicated way, in the most direct way. She was grateful for the cold that had taught her what she was made of, for the failed snares and the rabbit that got away and the fire that took 4 tries, for November figuring out the latch from the inside, for the 3 inches that she still didn't understand and trusted completely, for Court Denny's unexpected integrity, for Joe's wrong shoes and 3 pieces of cornbread and the surprised laugh that came when she needed it most. For the bread on the step, no note, no words, just presence. For Hattie Greer, who had been a justice of the peace for 3 years and told no one until the moment it mattered. She picked up the notebook, turned to the last page. Read it. Not because she'd forgotten she had it memorized by now, every word, the slant of every letter, but because some things you read again not for the information but for the company. To sit with the person who wrote them. Don't let them make you small, Willa. Don't let them tell you what you're worth. You're an Ashcroft. We build things. We don't let them be taken. She closed it. Put it in the satchel. She was taking it with her this time. It had lived in the dark long enough. It belonged on a shelf she could reach. She climbed the stairs, came out into the May light, stood on the broken porch one more time. "Thank you," she said, to the cabin, to the room below, to her father who was not there and had somehow never stopped being present. Then she walked to where November was tied, swung up, turned toward the western ridge. Joe was waiting at the top of the ridge when she got there, on the bay gelding, sitting easy, not the effortful, careful balance of a new rider, but the settled weight of someone who has found the center of the thing and stopped fighting it. Beside her, the frame of the first structure on the western ridge parcel. 4 walls, a roof beginning, the shape of something that would be there when the snow came next year. And the year after, and the year after that. The sky did something, the way it does sometimes in Colorado, the sunset deciding to be excessive. Clouds in layers catching the light going through red and orange and that specific bruised purple that looks like someone told the sky to be subtle and the sky declined. Willa pulled November to a stop beside Joe. They both looked at it. "Good Lord," Joe said. "I know. Does it always—" "Not often enough." A pause, the horses standing still, the light doing its excessive thing. "Joe," Willa said. Your father's North Section claim, the one Rourke was building a case against. We should file a confirmation registration with Theodore Marsh. Same process as mine." She looked at the horizon. "Before anyone else gets ideas." Joe was quiet for a moment. "You don't." "I know I don't have to," Willa said. "I know that." A pause. "My father registered my claim before I was 12 years old, before I knew what a claim was, before I could have done it for myself." She looked at Joe. "Someone prepared something for me before I knew I'd need it. And it saved my life. Not figuratively." A long pause. "Literally. It saved my life." She looked back at the sky. "Seems right to do the same when I can." Joe was quiet for a long time, the kind of quiet that is full of something. "He'd have liked you," she said finally. "My father, Walter Vance. Stubborn old man who built things and didn't talk about them." "Sounds familiar," Willa said. "He would have said you were terrifyingly sensible." "Is that a compliment?" "From him." Joe looked at her. "It's the highest one there is." Willa laughed. "The real kind. The kind that comes from somewhere you weren't braced for." Joe laughed too, and the sound of both of them together out on the ridge in the fading excessive light on land that belonged to Willa Fern Ashcroft, by registration and by right, and by the love of a man who had built something in the dark and trusted her to find it was one of the best sounds either of them had ever made. November was impatient, shifting her weight, tossing her head once the specific gesture that meant, "I have been standing here long enough and I would like to go now." "Okay," Willa said to the horse. "Okay." She looked at the sky one more time, the colors going now, the excessive sunset fading into the particular blue dark of a Colorado evening. Stars coming, slow at first, then all at once. She looked at Joe. "Ready," she said. Joe looked back, considered it. "Yes," she said, and this time it was true. Not the brave answer, not the answer that means I am terrified but I am doing this anyway. The real answer, the answer that comes from somewhere solid. Willa leaned forward over November's neck. And they rode, down the ridge and across the plain, into the last of the light, past the cabin with its broken porch and its hatch in the floor and its cold, dark room that had been for 5 months the whole world, past the county office where Theodore Marsh was still at his desk, probably filing and recording and stamping the things that made things real, past Hattie's saloon where the back room light was on for Tuesday, into the life that was waiting to be built. In 1886, in the territory of Colorado, there were no laws written specifically for women like Willa Ashcroft. Those laws would come later. Written in part because women like her had already been living them in the cold and the quiet, in rooms built for them by people who loved them before they knew they'd need it. Not a law, not a proclamation. A room, a document, a notebook, 3 inches off the ground. November was impatient, shifting her weight, tossing her head once. "Okay," Willa said. "Okay." She looked at Joe. "Ready," she said. Joe looked back, considered it. "Yes," she said. And this time she meant it. Willa leaned forward over November's neck, and they rode.